Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and/or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories, and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. I am Katie Taylor. I am a certified child life specialist. And if you are new to this podcast, we are so glad that you're here. And I'm very glad that you ended up here at JR's episode. So I will be speaking to this wonderful mom who has older children now, and I make her go back and relive some of the things she had at the beginning of her son's life and talking all about what has changed in not only in her son, but in herself over the past couple of decades. One of the things I love about JR is that she has come to this completely vulnerable and completely open to talking about the ultimate decision she made, that it was not best for her and her son to live under the same roof for the sake of their relationship, for safety, for being able to get the most out of what they love in one another. And I just completely commend her for coming on and talking about that. The other thing I really want to take away from this conversation that I know I did, and I hope you do too, is that sometimes the answer is that there's not an answer and that you just have to try out new things. And that can go with living situations, with PT and OT. It can go with so many different parts of your child's medical journey or a child's medical journey. And I just really think that that's a hard spot to be and live in, is that there is no good answer. And the answer is just trying something. And with trying comes that you may not succeed, that it may fail, but what can you learn about and try the next time? So that's really what I'm taking away from this episode. And I'm just so grateful to JR for being here on the podcast with us. And I am just so glad that you're here. Well, JR, thank you so much for being here. And I just so quickly wanted to push record because I could hear all of the goodness pouring out of your mouth. We'll get into your story, and I would love for you to introduce who you are, a little bit about your family, where you come from, and just a little bit more about you to all of our parents and healthcare professionals that listen to our podcast.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for having me, Katie. I'm JR, and I'm a mom of three young adult sons. And the middle one, who's 22 now, so my boys are 23, 22, and 20. The middle one has a severe diagnosis. He has intellectual disability. He has some seizures. He has autism, a very hard time communicating. He has some behaviors that are really difficult, like aggression and self-injury, and he's a little underweight. He's a whole education for me, really. I've learned so much in caring for him, and I'm trying to understand how to help him in big and small ways. And so my education is, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, went to public high school, went to college on the East Coast, and majored in molecular biology, and went to graduate school and got a PhD in human genetics, and was a scientist for a while. I was a postdoc, and it was while I was a postdoc that I met my husband, and we got married, and I started having kids. And I was a little bit of an older mom, and so I was like, okay, let's have our kids, let's just have a bunch of kids and not, quickly, like don't rest too much in between because time's getting on here. And so did that. And so I had three kids, and even though my middle one was having delays and stuff, we didn't really know what was going on with him. We're like, well, it's sort of now or never. So let's have another kid. And And then as my middle one, my oldest and youngest are neurotypical, and they're lovely, lovely gentlemen. And my middle one is also a lovely gentleman, but he is basically at 22, he's still basically at sort of toddler level cognition. And with that is the emotional regulation of a toddler, and he has a lot of sensory differences. He has high anxiety. And so he's living in a group home, and he has actually since he was 12 and a half. And so my journey has been trying to help him develop, because we didn't know what was going on with him. He was just like a little boy who was delayed. Despite my sort of background in developmental biology and genetics, none of the tests we were doing, none of the genetics we were doing showed anything early on. It wasn't until he was 16 that he got diagnosed. So the whole early time was all like, oh, maybe he'll catch up, early interventions, maybe he'll catch up. So so we did that for a long time, and he wasn't catching up. And then his behavior started getting really bad, and that was really isolating. And then he went to a group home, and then I was feeling really terrible, because that's not what anybody wants. And including me, like I didn't want that, but it clearly was better for him, and it was better for our whole family. But getting over that was really, I'm pretty tenacious. And so it was hard to get over that, but I have now, and now he and I have a good relationship. And so now I volunteer with SYNGAP Research Fund. His disease is in SYNGAP1. It's a genetic disorder in SYNGAP1, which we learned when he was 16. And so I do volunteer work with them, and just try to connect with people in the community, either over genetics, over behaviors, over sensory issues, over emotional regulation. These are my new passions.
Mm. Well, you're clearly such a brilliant woman and mother, and it's really special that we've kind of been able to hear this full, not quite full circle, right? We're still always continuing on, but from the beginning of not knowing to where you are now, so grounded, so level-headed, and I'm sure all of the normal human emotions creep in for you still now, but can you walk us back through the beginning and what it was like for you? The transition into motherhood is never easy. And, I guess some people do say it was easy. It was not easy for me. And the transition into navigating medical or sensory or behavioral parenthood is what, I have a friend call like complex parenting. It's just so
Yeah.
complex. What was that like for you, coming from such an esteemed, clinical geneticist background to navigating this world of motherhood and complex motherhood at that?
Yeah, well, I was one of those kind of outliers for whom going straight to motherhood, it was pretty good, because I wanted to be a mother so badly, and I'd wanted to for so long, that I was, and also I have a lot of younger siblings. I'd done a ton of babysitting. I was the kind of person who babysat everybody's kids who I knew, all the people having kids that were my contemporaries. I babysat their kids. So I had a lot of sort of early childhood experience. And so going to that first kid was pretty seamless for me compared to other people. Like I can remember talking to someone who was telling me, at my job, my coworkers care what I think, and they listen to me. That's not happening at home. Like that's not happening with my children. Like, who do these children think they are? Like people actually
Yes.
come to me as an expert. How could you not take my advice? And then also I was a bench scientist, which is like, you're just kind of running around doing a lot of things all the time. So being, a lot of my friends would say, oh, I just hate being interrupted. And it's like, oh, I'm interrupted constantly, and my brain jumps around anyway. Like I don't mind being interrupted, right? Like that's not a hardship for me. In fact, I'm likely to interrupt my kids. I was more likely to interrupt my kids than they were to interrupt me, probably, or to have it feel like a problem. So I'd say the first kid was not a problem. I'd say the second kid was a problem, and not because he was my second kid and he had issues. It was a problem because I had figured out how to do this job by putting all my attention on one person, and then splitting that was just like splitting that focus between two was just really, really hard on me. And then having the third wasn't hard because then I'd already figured out how to split focus. So that was what was hard for me. It wasn't the things that most people that most people miss from their professional lives.
Yeah.
I was working with animals. Like I was already like cleaning up crap, like I was already doing things that were kind of semi humiliating, right? Like doing stuff with your hands. I was already doing stuff with my hands, running around, getting interrupted, like cleaning up stuff, like that part wasn't hard for me. I wasn't in a desk. I wasn't in board meetings. I wasn't traveling. I was already a Scott person who had a lot of creative independence. And that's what you get as a parent. You get a lot of creative independence.
Oh, such beautiful parallels to like who you already were as a person before you became a parent and how you ended up parenting. What was the process like then of kind of finding your voice and trusting your instinct and advocating for your family's needs, your son's needs when you were thrust into appointments or, school
Yeah.
teachers and all of that? What was that process like of trusting yourself and your gut and speaking up?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I tend to be a person who speaks up a lot. So, but I also want to know the experts' opinions. And so I did spend a lot of time going to different specialists, whether they were MDs or other types of specialists. And I had one therapist early on, she was a speech therapist, say to me, "Oh, I'm so sorry, you have to mourn the loss of the child you expected and try to understand who it is you have." And I just looked at her. I was like, not one of my doctors has said that to me. And she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I was like, yeah, it was actually all the expert doctors that were completely wrong, right? Like they were the ones saying, "Oh, just do all this early intervention and you can catch them up." And so here I am with this job that turned out to be 100% impossible. Like now that I know what his genetic issue is and what his cellular biochemistry is, like that, I understand that was actually not going to happen. But I didn't know that, right? And so I have all this weight on me trying to do all these things, trying to find the therapies that will just unlock the key, right? I want to find the key that's going to unlock the development is actually what I meant. And so I had a lot of pressure on myself, and I had a lot of fear, and I had a lot of I called it guilt, but it isn't actually guilt. It's more just like inner conflict of like what I value all my kids, I value all their development. Now, how do I spend my time? How do I spend my time to get that going? And fortunately, I saw a lot of doctors, and most of them did like pretty much nothing to help us. But I also saw a lot of therapists, and I know I sound kind of ungrateful. They just didn't know, right? Like the science wasn't there yet. They just didn't know what was happening. Nobody had any kind of idea how to stimulate typical development when it was blocked, because they didn't understand what the blocks were and what could possibly help. So, we're just stuck with no answers. But I guess I want to say two things. The first is that in the early intervention, there's like so much early intervention you can do, and sometimes it helps and sometimes it doesn't. And it's really set up. It's really set up for the people. I'm very deliberately going to use a word that's maybe people haven't heard in this context before, but it's really set up for the kids that have the privilege of a brain that will change, that have the privilege of a brain that is going to respond to these treatments. And that's how humans develop. Like that's how we're experiential. We are changed by the things that happen around us. But if your brain chemistry doesn't really allow that, you don't have that privilege, right? You're still a human, you're still a person, but you don't have the privilege of having the neuroplasticity to change and learn. And so that's that's where my son was. That's where Joey was. And I just was like, okay, I look at him, he's such an innocent, right? He's beautiful, he's innocent, he's my child. Like, like any parent's love for their child. I'm using beautiful as a just like what you think when you see your child, right? Like it's not some like social media beautiful. It's just like it's this thing that you care about so much and you have so much protection for, and you have so many
Mm-hmm.
hopes for, and you have so much, you're so in tune with them, and you're so delighted, you're so delighted by anything they do, and then they don't get to develop, and it's really tough. It's tough because that's kind of like two things at once. Like you have all this love and you have all this fear, and it's hard not to on a daily basis. It's hard not to let the fear win and
Oh, sure.
um have you change how you parent and change, how you feel and change what they see and change their experience. So anyway, I know I'm getting a little meta here. We should go back to an
No,
actual
I
question.
love meta. Give me all the meta because you've just brought something to light for me that I hadn't really considered the perspective of. And that is that therapy, whether it be, for your own personal mental health or speech therapy or OT, PT, usually comes with the goal of some sort of transformation.
That's
But
right.
to your point, what if the transformation doesn't exist and then the goal is actually just to participate in the day and almost kind of a playful attitude? How much
That's
more
right.
wonderful would your experience have been if the goal was to be here today and exist and do the best we can, then focused on this goal?
That's exactly right. And I mean, I'm not against goals. Like I'm not against goals, but for occupational therapy, I found an amazing, amazing practice. Some people might have already heard of it. They might have tried it and not liked it, but for us, it was just absolutely the best. And it's called Floor Time, and it's like DIR Floor Time. And we used Rosemary White in Seattle or North Seattle and Shoreline actually. And she's just an incredible human who's done so much work in this realm. And she's, known internationally. And our time together, not just with her, but with people, therapists in her office, it was really about teaching me pacing and how to increase it was teaching me about the levels of emotional regulation and how to not only try to work at his maximum, but how to work at his medium or his lowest point also, and how to adjust my pacing, think about his sensory needs, think about working on, like, he's nonverbal, but we really worked a lot on back and forth gestural stuff. And we did a lot with puppets. Puppets are really playful. And so you can have a puppet go through something and then have him, kind of witness that, and then have him maybe do some problem solving. And the problem solving might be as simple as him like moving the puppet's hand, right? Like I'm not talking about like really intense problem solving, but if Joey's on a swing and he doesn't want somebody moving his hands and the puppet tries to move his hand, then he can like interact with the puppet, right? So that's like a small example of something that a nonverbal child with intellectual disability that's a meaningful exercise for him. And you can use playfulness and you can use different emotions and you can use, and so you can bring a richness in that doesn't necessarily happen when it's mom and kid,
Mm,
because the mom kid dynamic, it's like already, like you already know your mom's gonna pick you up and hug you if you feel bad, like you just know it, like it's not but the puppet, the puppet's different. The puppet has this sort of objectivity that even in the child's mind, the puppet is separate from mom, so it can make things different.
absolutely. What a beautiful resource and really tool to use in your case. I would love to hear from you, what were some of the things that worked well for you in taking care of yourself, which I know, I'm not talking about like self-care really. I'm talking about like getting through the day to day. Were you someone who diligently took notes? I can kind of gather that you were that researcher, right? Going through, all of the different specialties, was it friendships and support? What really helped you get through the beginning stages of navigating everything?
Yeah, it's hard to remember. I mean, honestly, like all the kids individually, each of my kids really were, it's like they almost supported me in doing and taking care of the others. Each of them had different needs and different understandings of the world and stuff. And so they each had like different things that taught me about the others, I guess is how I would say that.
Mm.
So like
Yeah.
my first one was really demanding. My second one was never demanding. Like he didn't demand anything. And that was a problem, right? Like he was like
Yeah.
so chill that it was a problem. And then my last one was he was so go with the flow. In fact, I'll move on to like other things that actually helped because not everybody has this, but I'll say one thing that my youngest son said. He was really young. He was probably like 3 years old, and he got upset. And at this point, I'm learning all about emotional regulation and how my middle son doesn't have it, and so Joey doesn't have it. And so I see my youngest get upset. I see him recover, and I just look at him and I'm like, oh my gosh, how'd you do that? Right? Because when you have someone who can't
Yes.
settle down, you're like, what's the magic trick? Like, what's the thing?
Yeah.
And so I just remember asking him, I was like, I got to ask him. And I was like, I can't ask him. He's like too little. Like, this is crazy. And I was like, no, I just got to do it. I got to ask him. And I was like, how did you calm down? And he was like, it's obvious. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, Mom, it's obvious. It's just, I just calmed down. And I was like, do you mean time happened? And he's like, yeah, time happened.
Mm.
And I said, well, how did that help? And he said, Mom, in the future, everybody isn't crying. And I was like, what? Are you sure? Like, because a lot of times it seems like in the future, everyone's going to be crying. It's like, it
Mm.
kind of feels that way, right? It just feels like everything's going downhill. And so,
Oh, I love when kids just like put us in our place and make us think, and
yeah,
they're so deeply profound on a level that
yeah,
you don't even understand.
yeah. It was like in the future, everybody's crying. And I was like, oh, he must. And then I actually was like, okay, well, he must think this from his parents and his extended family and his friend group and stuff. And I was like, that's the definition of optimism, right? Like, okay, so
Love it.
I've managed to have a kid at 3 be optimistic. That's pretty good. So
I'm so curious, is he still this wise? Does he still represent that little conversation?
yeah, he is. He is. I'd say he doesn't love to do it, but yeah, he
He's
is.
got
He
it in
didn't
him.
even he didn't even love to do that. He was giving me side eye. He's like, Mom, why do you have to
Um,
ask me this? Anyway, I would
when
say
yeah.
you asked me how I took care of myself. I think I like my child wasn't sleeping, and my friends just didn't, like, no one could really handle the things he needed. And I was really like the younger he was, the more insistent I was on things being really specific and helping him. And then the harder he got and the more tired I got, the more I kind of relaxed that, but he was getting so difficult that other people couldn't handle him. Right. And so like early on, he might just like sit on a blanket while we all did stuff, but I wasn't willing to do that. Right. Because I wanted him to develop. And then later he would, you know, leave the party or eat all the brownies or break something, or you know what I mean? Like that later it was just too hard. And so I'd have to say I was pretty lonely. And so I'd say the things that helped me were really it's like looking at my own thoughts. That's what helped me. I'll give you an example. I would say my son has a really hard time talking. He can't talk. And that's true. It's like 100% true. But I'd always feel bad. And I'd feel bad because I felt responsible. I was like, well, I have to help him and I don't know how. And it's my job, like I have to do this. And so I'd say he can't talk and then I'd feel bad. And it's like somebody else would be like, oh, he can't talk, but they don't feel bad, right? Like that's not something that
Mhm.
automatically makes you feel bad. It's a fact and it doesn't have to make you feel bad. And so then you have to think, well, how much energy is this taking for me to feel bad about it? Like, is it going to be easier to just accept where we are now, not feel bad and just move on? Or is it going to be better to feel really terrible and feel like I have to work harder? So do you see what I mean? There's a lot of
Oh,
like,
$100%.
there's a lot of kind of like just self-coaching in here, because it's like, it's very natural. It's not only natural, it's entirely cultural. Our
It,
culture wants moms to be martyrs. All our good stories are about little little kids who grow up with a single mom who has nothing and devotes everything to their children, and then their children are successes, and then that's the success story. And it's like, well, wait a minute, that's not great for the mom. Like, let's give moms some more support in here. Let's give moms something they can do for themselves so they feel like a whole person. Let's not relegate moms to be the people who give everything and don't get anything back, and they don't even know how beautiful they are. You're beautiful because you don't know how beautiful you are. You're great because you give everything and you never ask for anything back. It's like, no, those aren't great. That's a problem. So anyway.
it's so true, because it's like kind of that classic, like, give yourself the grace that you would give someone else.
Yeah.
And we've all heard that before, but it's much easier said than done, because it's like, what if we would have done one more hour of sitting there and working on his development, or if I would have tried this, and rationally you can look at that and say, well, that's just not true, but that's not how our brain is necessarily set up to work with all of these cultural and societal influences. So what you're
Yeah.
saying to me is just this, like, objectively look at your thoughts as thoughts and not as fact, and look at facts as fact.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. It's like, when facts make you sad, think about why, because it's not the fact that's making you sad. It's your interpretation of what that means to you that is making you sad. Not that it shouldn't.
It's
I'm not saying no one should ever be sad. Sadness is like, here to stay. Sadness is here to stay. I'm in grief over a lot of things around my son. That's here to stay. I'm not trying to get over all of it, but there are things that hold me back. When something's holding me back, that's a time to look at it. Oh, you were talking about how would you advise someone else? I have to say, the most progress I've made on how to think about caring for myself, by far the most progress I've made is in considering it is when my kids got older and my kids like started becoming closer to adult age. And I started realizing they're going to do what I've done, or they're going to show the values that I've showed them. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I do not want them to beat themselves into the ground. Like, that's just not okay. And so
yeah.
when they were little, it was like, no, I'm in charge. I'm responsible. I have to do this. They're not going to notice the lengths I'm going to, because it's just, no kid would. But then later I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is a bad plan, because if I need to know what I really want to do, I really need to say, what would I advise one of my kids or one of my nieces? What would I advise them in the same situation? And it's amazing how different the advice is. At the beginning for me, the advice was so different. And I was like, okay, this is telling me something here. This is telling me I'm not actually living in
Rethink
my
your own
values.
playbook.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So I'd say, I guess that one, maybe that, like, if I had just one thing, I think it would be that. Well, the two things would be: A, look at emotional regulation; B, figure out what you would tell your own child, your own niece, your own nephew.
Yeah, I love that perspective, even more than a friend. It's
Yeah.
like this child that you so delicately want to raise and instill values in. That's how you should treat yourself.
Yeah, because we have this, the preciousness cannot be overstated, that we have for our children.
Oh, so true. Oh,
Yeah.
you've used two words, which preciousness and delight, which I need to add more into my vocabulary, because those are so much the words that we feel for our kids, and why this is such an important topic for other parents to know, that the choices, the things we do to do best by our child and have them thrive, doesn't ever negate the preciousness that we feel from them. And you're exactly right.
Oh, thank you.
You've written a book, which I want to get to, but I do want to spend some time, if you're willing, to talk about the decision to put your son into a different home. And
Yeah, of course.
I I think that that is something that people tend to stay away from talking about and is a very normal and healthy decision for families. So could you talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you? I'm sure it wasn't a one-time conversation, but maybe, how you finally decided and then how you have integrated this, kind of two-home way of living.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to say is that I've always assumed my kids would live separate from me as adults. So I know I've met and am good friends with a lot of people with kids who are like, nope, taking care of them, like they're staying with me. And I'm like, that's great. That's a wonderful plan. Like I have no issues with that. But I have to say from the outset, that was never my long-term plan, partly for their sake, partly for my sake, partly for, just like, I don't want to get into anything being better than anything else. I just want to state that like, that was
Mm.
my starting position. And when my son was probably around 8 or 9, he started having aggressive and self-injurious behaviors, and they just kept getting worse. And we did a lot of things to try to change that. We tried to change the environment in different ways. We did a lot of behavioral therapies. I put him on a medication that was supposed to change this. That didn't help at all. And it was just kind of terrifying. And his self-injury looked like biting his hands, and he would bite them until they bled. And then he would do it so often that they wouldn't heal and they would get infected. And the doctors would be, and so he's the kind of kid too that you take him to a behaviorist at the clinic. He'd sit in the corner and play, like he'd be fine. And we'd get out and we'd drive down the street, and then he'd be like screaming and kicking the back of the seat and, like really, and I was like, all right.
Totally.
So I was like, all right. So the behavior, I have to say the behaviors didn't really help until we had one coming out to the house and coming, observing, and that person was able to tell me that your son's behaviors are all communication. It could, because not everyone's behaviors are all communication. There's a lot of reasons for behaviors. And so my sons really were about communication, and they were about him basically protesting what was going on. And so I think I was underestimating how hard it was for him in this sort of in the sensory environment. So it's just sort of like how uncomfortable he was in the sensory environment. I was also underestimating how hard it was for him. Like, remember, I'm like on the development track. So I would be like, do you want this? I'd hold something up. Do you want this? And instead of just letting him grab it, I'd be like, say please, or say yes, or say ball, or say,
Mm.
you know what I mean? I'm like, I'm requiring things of him a lot, like literally requiring things of him in order for him to have access to things. And that seems like a really good idea to me, but I think that was a lot for him. And then we were also driving around a lot to schools and to therapies and all this stuff. And he always liked getting in the car, but I think that that's a lot of visual information. He's got a really good visual memory. And so I think that was a lot to have to remember, sort of, you know what I mean? Like that was like kind of a lot for him. Not that he had to, but I think he just does naturally. And then the last thing is he likes to walk around. He likes to be in charge of himself. Who doesn't? But he likes to move around and walk around and stuff. And so when we were in the car, he wasn't getting to decide where to go. And then when we were somewhere out that wasn't our house, he wasn't getting to decide where to go, right? Like I'm holding his hand, I'm pulling him through the school. I'm like, no, we can't go in that room. We got to go in this room, and we got it, so he
Mm.
didn't have a lot of agency. And for a lot of the day, I mean, he did at home. I'm not, but we weren't home a lot. And then school was hard for him. Like, just come sit in this chair, come do calendar time, come do this, come do that thing. So anyway, I think all those things were too much for him. And so his behaviors were so bad that I was getting, it was like at the limit of what I could really handle. And so at one point, I don't know if you've ever had to do this, hopefully not, but hopefully some of the listeners will have, which is if you're on any kind of meds, a lot of times there's a night nurse. And so you like call the emergency night nurse, and they talk you through things. And they always say, "Are you okay?" And I'm always like, "Yeah, we're okay. This is just hard." Like, I want to know what else to do. And so finally one day I was like, "No, I'm not okay. He's not okay. I'm not okay either." Like, and so it was that saying, "I'm not okay," to somebody in charge. I didn't really understand that was like a go, no go thing, but now it kind of makes sense, like, are you safe? I
Right.
don't think it was okay. I think it was, are you safe? Are you safe? And I'm like, I don't think I'm safe. I don't think he's safe. Like, this doesn't seem like
Yeah.
safety to me.
Right.
And it was weird because it wasn't significantly different than the days before, but it was just like the pile up and the lack of, how my little one had said, in the future, everyone isn't crying. It was like, no, I don't see a future where people are crying. Like, I don't see this. I don't see how this is going to resolve. It's only getting
Right.
worse, and it's too much. And so that's what got us a core waiver and the voluntary placement program. And I didn't think, I was just like, I don't think this is going to work, but I just had to try it because it's the kind of thing, like, if it's not working, you just bring your kid home, like, it's not like I wasn't giving up parental rights or anything. It was voluntary. It wasn't CPS coming in and saying your child's being taken away. You can't safely care for them anymore. It was me saying, we need help. How can you do this? And they're like, okay, we can do this by this mechanism. And I
Yeah.
was so scared. I was so scared because you wouldn't believe the number of decisions I was making, the number of accommodations, hourly, like many, many, many decisions and accommodations per hour to try to help him navigate the world. And I was like, that's going to go away. And yeah, and then it was better for him right away, which was just fantastic and also devastating. It's like, oh, so
Mm.
actually like being without me. So
Mm.
anyway, but it's been really good. It's been a process for me to understand and feel good about that. We have a really good relationship. My son and I do. All of my sons and I do, but my middle one, Joey in particular. Um,
Mm.
and it allows me to be all the good stuff in his life, and for him
Oh,
to not have anxiety around it, because he
yeah.
knows I can do all the good stuff in his life. And so when I'm there all the time, it's like he gets anxious because he wants all this good stuff, but then I refuse it. And then he doesn't like that.
Yeah.
So if he's with other people who he's not expecting that of, he's much calmer. And also they don't require that much of him. I still do require some. I don't, not as much as I used to, but
Yeah.
so that's does that kind of, that
Oh
takes
my
care of it,
gosh,
right?
beyond
Yeah.
you've put so much out there. So honestly, and one of the things I love and I'm gonna take away is just like the curious, like, let's try this. It may not work. It might work. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that because you make a choice, that's the definitive answer forever. But sometimes that's what it feels like. Is right. You're making this choice and this is the future forever, but that's not what it is.
Yeah, and I would say that especially with someone who's nonverbal, and not only nonverbal, but has such a different experience of the world, like my son and I can be in the same room, we're experiencing different things, right? And so because our sensory profiles are so different. And so someone who is so different from you, I just have to say that trials is really the only thing you can do. Like, all you can do is try something and watch and see what happened, and look at his breathing, look at what he's looking at, look at, is he hungry now? Is he thirsty now? Like, is he tensing, or is he, what is he doing? Right. You just have to do trials and see what happens. And the trials have to be big enough that you can actually get some information from it, because a lot of times it just seems like there's no, this is why education around the sensory stuff was helpful, because then I had a better clue as to what was, things to look out for, right? Like, if you like, when I didn't know anything about his issues, it was very hard for me to make heads or tails of situations. And so the more I learned about what the issues were, and then could see it, like if I could see it in real time, then I could be like, okay, now I've got a handle on that. Now I have some now I can make sense of the surroundings and what's happening. Because a lot of times it seems random. I mean, sometimes I have felt like, I bet my kid has kidney stones. Like if someone's just like starts screaming bloody murder out of for no reason, you're like, I wonder if you have a kidney stone, like that, because that's actually really painful. So
Yeah.
So anyway, there's a lot of what do you call it? Uncertainty, kind of. I don't really mean chaos. I just mean unpredictability and uncertainty about what's happening and why. And so the more you can learn about your kid, and the more you can, even if you can't learn anything about it, I guess I'd say consider where they're the most calm and do more of that. Just do more of wherever they are the most calm, and just see if you can find anything that's like actually calming.
Oh, that's a really good tip. I love that. And just take note of it.
Yeah.
So you have such wonderful perspectives, and you've taken what you have experienced and created this new book for other parents, just like the ones who are listening to this podcast. Tell us a little bit about what people can expect in the book and where they can find it, and what you loved the most about writing it.
Yeah. Well, I wrote a book about my parenting journey with my son. So it's not really it's about me. It's about me, right? More than him. And I do it through, first part of the book is just some vignettes. So it's like from when he was little to when he's older, it just goes in chronological order. And I just like show a little thing that happened. And then I have some sort of takeaways from it, like sort of what I learned. Basically, my whole goal was to show my thoughts over time and actually how they changed over time. So my thoughts on the chapter when he was 4 are really my thoughts from then. And then if you read something later, it's like my thoughts from when it was later, right? So I'm just kind of trying to show my transformational journey over time. And so the middle part has some, instead of vignettes, if I was a better writer or taken more notes or something, I might have vignettes, but it's more just summary, because it was hard to think of. But I had a couple things I really wanted to say about parenting, especially for extreme special needs, around fear and frustration and around acceptance. And so those are kind of more summary stuff. And then in the last part, I talk about parent coaching, partly because that's what I'm really passionate about now. And I'm actually a parent coach now. And so I just kind of wanted to show some of the changes that happened within me based on changing my thoughts, and even just examining my thoughts. And then just talk about what you can expect in parent coaching. So you can get, the book is called More of Everything. And then the subtitle is really a mouthful: How I Became a Better Parent to My Child with Extreme Special Needs by Lifting My Emotional Burdens. And it's on Amazon in Kindle and paperback version. And yeah.
What was the book writing process like for you? And I imagine it was therapeutic. We've had a number of parents come on and have done similar things, and just writing it out and even speaking, about it on the podcast can sometimes feel good. What did you have that same, is that what drew you to write it?
Well, I actually just took a fiction writing class, like an adult education fiction class is how I started.
Ooh.
And it turned out that I can't write anything that didn't happen. And so I just started, just writing things that had happened. And then they were like, well, just change, like, the color of the car, or like change, they're like really trying to encourage me to change things. And I'm like, I can't change anything. So anyway, that's how it started. And then once I had started that, I couldn't really stop writing. And then I decided to write kind of more of it's basically a hybrid between a memoir and a self-help book. And it was really long. I have to say, it was like really long. It was really awful. And I just kept at it, and I kept foisting it on my friends. And it was, I'm sure it was hard for people, but because in the beginning, especially, it was
It's a
not great,
process.
not great. And so it took a lot of time to go, like you kind of have to get like a lot out, put a lot down on paper, and then try to organize it in some way. And I've actually reorganized the book so many times. Like it used to actually be, the way I wrote it was in 5 sections that were kind of more thematic, 5 themes. And then later, people I know, even people like in my family, they're like, this is so confusing. And I was like, all right, I'm going to have to put the vignettes in chronological order. Because even people who know us can't figure out what the heck's happening with his age. And so I just was like, okay, I'll just put the vignettes in chronological order. And then the stuff that was left over was this other stuff that I couldn't not write about it because it seems so important for this journey. And that's the acceptance and the fear and frustration. And then I wrote about coaching. So that I would say that it was very, very hard for me. And I wrote a lot, and then I'd wait months, and then I would redo the whole thing. And then I'd wait, 6 months. And then I kept trying to finish it. And then I just couldn't finish it. I couldn't pull the trigger on anything. And so what's really interesting is that Joey kept aging, right? And so then I could write another story about it. And so actually after he turned 21, I was like, now I know why I couldn't finish the book. Like things actually changed so much after he was 21, and I didn't realize that was going to happen. I had no
That's
sense
really
of that.
Cool.
Yeah. So the whole time I was feeling kind of like, like I'm not exactly lazy, but just kind of like, oh, why can't I get this done? Why is this not happening? Because other people were like, you need to finish that book. And I'm like, yeah. But it was interesting that
the timing is everything.
Yeah, because then I was like, okay, now I'm done. Not like I'll never write another thing about it, but it felt like that book was done now, whereas that book hadn't been done before. So I mean, it hadn't been finished before, it hadn't been complete.
That is so interesting. I can't wait to read it. Well, I can't thank you enough, JR, for speaking so candidly and openly with us today. And we'll make sure we have a link to your book so that everyone can go buy it and read it. And just thank you again for your honesty about what it was like for you, and that it wasn't always easy and there was a lot of trial and navigating it all. But thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. And I loved what you said at the beginning about just having a place for parents who are like, is there someone else out there like me? Like that is so important. And you making this community is such a big help to people. I really, really appreciate it. And I love that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that. That means so much. And I'll never stop. I mean, I'm like, I'm like you with the book. Like I don't see an ending. So,
Right.
all right. Well, thank you, JR.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all so much for listening to Child Life on Call. If you head to our website, childlifeoncall.com, you're going to find all sorts of stuff there for parents, professionals, healthcare providers, child life specialists, no matter who you are. Actually, when you just go to our homepage, it'll help you direct to exactly where you need to go. On that, you'll find opportunities and PDUs for child life specialists. Parents, we've got a starter kit for you. And clinicians, we even have a clinician course, which teaches you how to be a confident and capable caregiver in pediatrics. We're so grateful that you're here. Please DM us on Instagram. And like I mentioned, when you rate and review this podcast, it helps other families be able to find us. So let's keep doing that. And I will see you again here next week.